Good evening. Wow, that was beautiful music by Crafton Barnes and the artwork from all our artists from over the years. Welcome to our 2022 film series, If Not Us, Then Who? Thank you for joining us tonight. We have an incredible agenda for you tonight, but before we launch the evening, we want to thank the people who support us, like you. First, we want to thank Miles Levine for his incredible film and for sharing his brave journey over the last year with us. We also want to thank Jim Abrams for sharing his expertise as a filmmaker to facilitate the conversation around how epilepsy is portrayed in cinema. Jim is also the co-founder of the Charlie Foundation for Ketogenic Therapies and a father of an adult son who hasn't had a seizure for 28 years due to the ketogenic diet. And our thanks to Ian Bone for joining our team to provide us with a unique perspective as a professor, a neurologist, a writer, and a father of an adult son living with epilepsy. During the film, we ask that you turn off your cameras. Everyone will be on mute to start. And please remember to unmute yourself and raise your hand during the open discussion if you have questions. And please be patient, and I'll find you and spotlight you. Now, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Julie Thompson-Dobkin, our president and co-founder of Hidden Truths Project, a neurologist and a mother of an adult son with epilepsy. Jules, take it away.
Thanks, Heidi, and thanks everybody for joining us. I see a lot of familiar faces, but a lot of new faces, so welcome. For those of you that don't know about our work, Hidden Truths Project is built upon the use of a creative platform, which becomes a personal narrative for people across the globe who live with epilepsy. And it's a means for them to share lived experiences. Through the use of art, it's allowed us as an organization to recognize this amazing, talented group of diverse individuals and their contributions for understanding and acceptance of this complex disorder. Although each of their stories and experiences are unique, there is a common thread which kind of binds them and unites them. And it might be just the discrimination they've experienced, once labeling which has occurred once they've been given this diagnosis, the fear with the uncertainties of epilepsy, all which can lead to a life of overprotection, concealment, loneliness, and isolation. Historically, written language was developed to become a physical embodiment of a spoken language, which allowed an individual to express something about their external existence. Unfortunately, language is very finite in its ability to describe what happens internally in someone's life. And in art, for our purposes, the seizure experience, the aura, the sense of disconnect in the brain, or the psychosocial issues many with epilepsy experience. Art, fortunately, is extremely unique in its ability to communicate complex internal abstractions in a very meaningful way to express a message to the outside world. And this is accessible regardless of one's written or spoken language, cultural, social, educational, or economic backgrounds. It can also fill a need for human communication to complete gaps in knowledge for someone to make it more understandable, especially in the world of epilepsy. Our work really began in 2012 with national art exhibits, all the art from individuals that live with epilepsy or caregivers. Over the years, we've expanded our work to include mindful-based art workshops for adults and children with epilepsy. We implemented an empowerment scholarship for graduating seniors with epilepsy to pursue higher education in the arts, advocacy work, or healthcare. And this year, we're actually expanding it to other adults with epilepsy who want to further their efforts in changing the world, whether it be advocacy work in epilepsy or further education. And then in 2021, we had the extreme fortune of launching the If Not, Then Who series, which was highly successful. So tonight we are excited to kick off our 2022 series with the original film we showcased, Under the Lights by Miles. And so we're really stoked to have him back. Thank you, Miles. Film is a very powerful tool to engage with the public. It really is a source of entertainment, but it has this extraordinary ability to influence public perception. Unfortunately, epilepsy has historically been represented in cinema in a very distorted way. It was sensationalized, associated with fear and victimization, the supernatural and violence, and really to maximize the audience unease. And all of this really, I mean, my personal bias on this is to up ticket sales, to increase blockbuster appeal and win awards. Well, our film series is trying to change that trajectory. And what we're trying to do is bring epilepsy out of the closet to portray truth versus fiction, to dispel the falsehoods, and really reveal an inside-outside story. And we do this through engaging people with epilepsy, driving the narrative of the film. In Epilepsy and Behavior, Sally Baxendale on epilepsy on the silver screen in the 21st century stated, although there has been a steady progression away from concealment of the condition, epilepsy continues to signal an otherness in movie characters and seldom in a good way. And then in another article by Schneider and Conrad, it says, epilepsy, like sex and death, must be made speakable. It is only then that we can begin to banish the ghosts that have so long made it mysterious and threatening. And now it is my great honor to introduce Jim Abrams. Jim and I have known each other since 2015 when he was our honoree for Hidden Truths of Mine Unraveled. Prior to this, I just knew of Jim through his comedic series, The Airplane Movies. But once I found a Hidden Truths project, Jim and I connected on a much more serious level, not through comedy, but through epilepsy. As Heidi mentioned, Jim has an adult son that now has not had a seizure for 28 years, and I have an adult son with epilepsy as well. And this was our connection. Jim, along with Nancy Abrams, as Heidi mentioned, founded the Charlie Foundation for Ketogenic Therapies. We are extremely fortunate to have Jim join us last year as part of our film team for the If Not Us, Then Who series. And actually, Jim coined the name of the title, or the name of the series. So it's an absolute honor and pleasure to introduce Jim.
Thank you, Julie. Let me first apologize for the bruises you may see on my face. I hope you see them as a willingness to sacrifice my vanity and my admiration for Cruise, Miles Levin, and his film project, Under the Lights. The If Not Us, Then Who series derives its title from the realization that the very best people, perhaps the only people, to dispel the centuries of stigma and misunderstanding of epilepsy are not those who see it from the outside, but those of us who experience it, live it, and can express it. In Hidden Truth's case, through the arts. I think that among the most interesting reviews of any movie I worked on came from my sister after she saw First Do No Harm, a movie I made with Meryl Streep that closely mirrored my family's experience with my son Charlie's epilepsy, the impact on the family, the adverse effects of drugs and a failed brain surgery, and finally discovering the ketogenic diet that cured his epilepsy. My sister lives in Milwaukee and I'm out here in California with my family, so we were in an ever together when Charlie was sick. Her simple review when she saw First Do No Harm on TV was, now I get it. Now I get it. And that's really the point, isn't it? The centuries of misunderstanding and stigma, cruelty and myths, even the innocent naivete of people like my sister that have plagued the epilepsy community since the beginning of mankind are largely not born of malice, but rather of ignorance. And who better to combat the ignorance and be the teachers of the experiences and feelings that those of us whose lives have been affected by epilepsy. If not us, then who? The light bulb went off for me in 1994 when I asked Dr. Don Freeman, Charlie's pediatric neurologist at Johns Hopkins, why it had been up to me to find the ketogenic diet that stopped Charlie's seizures. Why none of the other pediatric neurologists in whose arms Charlie had seizures had mentioned a word about diet. He said diet therapy for epilepsy would never become popular if left to traditional means of medical communication, medical schools, symposia, publications, etc. As preposterous as it may sound, I remember thinking, maybe I can do something about that. If not me, then who? It seems as though Miles Levin has adopted a similar philosophy in making his film Under the Lights. My observation is that among the most valuable components of an effective filmmaker are passion, vision, and the ability to communicate a compelling story. Having gotten to know Miles a little bit over the last year, he certainly boldly checks all these boxes. So let's take a look at Into the Lights and then chat with Miles afterwards.
Hello?
Please tell me this is the boys' room.
Okay, time to go.
Hey, is your hair wet?
Get out.
I can't.
Jesus. Come on. Ah! Oh my god!
Ow!
Okay. Okay.
I dislocated my shoulder.
I'll call somebody.
No,
I'll
don't.
call like an ambulance
No,
or
please
something.
don't.
I'm so sorry.
Don't.
I'm so sorry.
You know Shelby Powell? Can you go tell her that I'll be right out? And I didn't forget.
What's your emergency?
Yeah, this guy hurt his shoulder. Yeah, I think he needs help.
Hang up.
Are they
Hang up.
responding?
Yeah, he said he dislocated it.
Come on, hang up!
Why are you in here?
What's the address? Ma'am? Hello?
Please go talk to Shelby. She's saving a dance for me. Please, no ambulance. Look, I got this, I got this.
What? Stop! Stop! Stop!
They'll call my mom.
Are you kidding me?
I'm really not supposed to be here.
In the girls' bathroom. Imagine that.
At prom.
What? Oh.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Stop! 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 Stop!
I got it.
What is your name? Do you even go here?
Your mascara's running.
So my boyfriend making out with someone.
Sorry.
So? How many beers did it take to get you into the girls' bathroom?
I don't drink. I have seizures. It's blindfold. I thought it would help with the light. I guess not. You can't tell anyone. You can't tell anyone, please.
Of course.
She's saving a dance for me.
Why won't you just hang here for a bit? Wait, no. Wait, please come back. Wait, no, stop. If you stay in here, I'll talk to you.
Sam?
I gotta go, Mom.
Do you want to tell me where? Sam. Sam, will you tell me where you're going?
Hang up. No.
Sam, tell me it's not dangerous.
911, please state your emergency.
Okay. This guy's having a seizure.
Just make sure he's breathing and don't
They'll
restrain
call
him,
my
okay?
mom.
Sam?
Check to see if he's carrying any epilepsy medication.
It would kill her. It'll kill her.
What is your location?
We're at Sullivan Valley High.
An ambulance should be there within 3 minutes. Stay where you are, okay?
They say that they'll be here in 3 minutes. What do I do?
Just be here.
Why would you go to prom if you knew that the lights would make you have a seizure?
Because it's worth it.
A dumb dance is worth having a seizure?
Yeah.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay.
I just want to be normal. One time. Once.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. You didn't know.
I pulled the fire alarm. We've been together for 3 years and I couldn't take it. I'm sorry.
You can't just leave like a normal person.
I wouldn't blame you if you hated me for it.
It's kind of awesome, actually.
What?
It's badass. What's a breakup story like that?
You're gonna have a seizure no matter what at this point, right? Do you want to go to prom with me? It's okay. It's okay. But only if you want to. You don't have to.
Could I borrow your phone? Hey, Mom. I know you're probably scared. I went to prom, Mom. Just like everybody else. It's just hard. I don't want to get hurt, but I'm tired of missing out. I know I'll never be a normal kid. But at least I don't have to wonder.
Well, that was a pretty powerful film, and I want to use this to kick off our discussion. And first, I want to direct a question to Miles for a panel discussion. Let me see here. Miles, are you there? Yeah. Hi. Miles, during our initial visit, at one point you stated you felt epilepsy was so random and unfair. And now that your film has been released, and has this given you the meaning that you hope to achieve through production of this film? And do you think that it's appropriately raised awareness in the direction you wanted it to?
Yeah, one sec. I'm trying to change the view here. Yeah, so the impetus for making the film is that I had never, as you said, seen something authentically portrayed on screen that reflected the people that I know and the experience that I've had. And so the goal was to prove a number of points. That one, if we put something out there that was authentic and that wasn't based in fear, but in or about what it feels like to have a seizure, things like that, but what it's like to be someone who does, and it's presented in sort of a universal format. In this case, no one likes to be left behind, no one likes to be left out, that the public would resonate with it, and we could get quote unquote regular people talking about it. Whereas in my experience, every time I've gotten up on a stage to talk about epilepsy, people in the audience are people who have epilepsy. And so it's a wonderful gathering, and maybe money is raised, but it rarely does much for the sake of awareness. And so in making the film, my hope was that I could come back to the epilepsy community and I could say, look, see, people do want to listen. People do want to hear our voices, and maybe you'll tell your story too. But I couldn't really have anticipated the response. We released it just 5 days ago. And I've been a filmmaker. I've been making films for some 10 years, and I've never, ever seen a short film that's unreleased have as much enthusiasm behind it as this did. We had kids sending in fan art, and it's worth mentioning, kids who do not have epilepsy sending in fan art saying, I can't wait to see this. I'm curious about this. I didn't know this word epilepsy. I'm looking this up. I have a friend who has epilepsy. What should I ask them? Is it okay to ask them questions? Just a lot of hope for the future, because it was presented in a format that excites people in a way that, as you said earlier, sometimes the written word doesn't accomplish on its own, in brochure format, for example. So we put the film out, and now it's been 5 days and has some 8,500 views on YouTube. And there are kids now who do have epilepsy reaching out, sending in videos saying things like, if this had been available when I was in high school, I would not have felt alone. And that's what I couldn't have anticipated. And so now, we'll move forward. We're going to develop the feature film, but it was really pleasant to be a part of something that was much bigger than myself. That while I am a filmmaker and I like making stuff and I want to put something out there that I'm proud of, and we certainly did that, that this is something that will live forever, that I don't have to be in the room to talk about epilepsy for this to be meaningful to someone. People will find this on their own. They would share this with their friends on their own, and epilepsy organizations can use this as a tool for the rest of time. And that is deeply fulfilling to me.
There was one other point I wanted to make, because I think it was near the end of the film, and you also stated this at one point. Movies about overcoming disability to achieve normalcy do not serve our community or cinema. And I know that can be, we call our organization, it's the hidden disability. but how, I think you've been able to represent that. You know, you wanted to feel normal, you wanted to go to prom, you wanted to be like everybody else. And so how, you know, when we use that term disability, how should we present it to the public? I mean,
well, I can start with the first part of that and explain what I mean. That a lot of times the way disability is viewed is from, I think, the able-bodied perspective, which is that wouldn't it be nice if this went away? Basically, that if a person can be lifted to be sort of at a level where the disability is no longer a problem, then the issue goes away and we can all hang out, kind of, you know, vibe. And we've seen that story before, and I'm really uninterested in that. I think that the narrative we should be telling is that disabilities are here to stay, and we have to, whether you have them or not, learn to live with them and not just tolerate them. There is a version of, from a disabled point of view, there is a version of the dream that exists. You just have to be creative enough to find it. For me, and in my experience, for the epilepsy community, the only thing more difficult than having seizures is the time between when you have to deal with people. And so this short film, what I attempted to do is, instead of saying like, oh, the boy went to the administration and they understood and they turned off the strobe lights and he went to prom too. Like, yes, that's a good story as well. But what I wanted to communicate was that all this person really needed in order to have his experience, though it would be different, was to be listened to. And furthermore, that just because he has a disability, that's not unique to him, that the other person in the room needed exactly the same thing. And the universal theme there is that we're all the same in that space, which is that everybody has some kind of hidden problem they're dealing with that they're not ready to talk about. And sometimes all we need in order to get to where we're trying to go is for someone to listen. So does that answer your question?
yeah, no, it does. And I think, you know, I think your film was really powerful in the sense that you can make epilepsy speakable, and it's part of our world. I mean, 1 in 26 people in America will have epilepsy. So if you're in a room of 100 folks, you're going to have 4 people with epilepsy in that room. And why does it have to be a label? Why can't it just be part of our community? And there was another statement that you made, and I think you did an amazing job in your film, is you wanted to not patronize the audience or kind of slap their hand and say, you know, shame on you, but more just to normalize their reaction to it and get rid of that fear. This is what you do, you know, kind of thing. And you did a great job at that. You want to comment on that?
Yeah. So another thing that I don't really think is useful in cinema is the archetype of the bully. I think it is very unuseful, because no one's going to side with the bully, right? No one identifies with the bully. So a lot of times in movies featuring, you know, a disabled character, it sort of starts with someone walking down the hall and pushes their books down, and you know, and it's why are we being so mean to him? Oh, it's because he's different, right? Okay, you know, we've seen this before. What I want the audience to do is to identify with the uninformed, as opposed to identify, because they'll never identify with the mean. And people aren't just mean because they're mean. People are mean because they're uninformed, and most people mean well. And in my experience, people who gave me trouble, if you ask them years later, they didn't know they were being mean. They're not bad people, they just uninformed. And stigma, the exciting thing, this is gonna sound, don't quote me on the first part of this. The exciting thing about stigma is that it's so basic. It's not a science. It's just people react in fear to things they don't understand. And so what I wanted to do was instead of having a main character and then a troublesome character, you have a main character and a regular person who just doesn't understand. And then once they do, their humanity comes out. And that's not, again, unique to people with disabilities. That's something we all have to do for each other. And so it's less of a lesson. I'm trying to, like you said, like slap the audience on the wrist and say, you know, don't be like Bob, you know, it's pointless. I want the audience to go in just as confused as Molly, they never say each other's names in the movie, but it's Sam and Molly. I want them to come in just as confused as Molly and to say, what is this? Who is this? This is confusing. I don't understand. And then to take the time to learn, to take the time to listen. And then it doesn't have to be a conscious thought of like, wow, I really like that guy now. All they have to do is walk away from this movie having known something about epilepsy and having felt something. And then when they meet the real Sam in public, their first reaction will be coming from a place of knowing something. And for what it's worth, that's exactly what happened in real life with the film, which is that the lead in the movie, you know, he had to work with me to very, very intimately understand this community. And he did so much work as an advocate, and really, really took this seriously and became embedded in his community and came to really, really love this community. And as a result of being a part of the project, he ended up helping someone who had been kicked out of their own family because their family didn't want to deal with the disability anymore. And he knew how to find that person resources. He knew all about epilepsy. And that's the power of something like this, is that you can bring in the uninitiated and you can have them leave having been there before. And that's what movies do best.
I think that the other day when we were chatting, you said you don't want people who are new to the epilepsy world to feel condemned.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly poignant. Can you tell us just a little bit about where you're going with this in terms of the feature?
Yeah, well, the first goal was to be on a Zoom call with Jim Abrams. That's the first goal. The second goal is
so that Jim Abrams can defend himself.
Yes. And the second is I have written and am developing the full-length movie, the full 100-minute movie, because there are different mediums to film, and short film is wonderful in that it is free and accessible and that this can live on YouTube forever, but it is limited in its reach. And a full-length movie that has access to things like streaming services could really reach the world in a completely different way. And so I've written these characters into a bigger story and am exploring deeper nuances that really, really, really are never seen in film, which is things like, how does epilepsy affect the family? What's it like to be mom? You know, what's it like to be a classmate? How does it affect the administration? Things like that, that we simply aren't talking about. And so I have to raise $1 million, and then we can get this thing done. You know, the team's all in place. It's just about having the money to move forward. But I really believe if you pay attention to what the LGBT community has done, what the Black community has done, in insisting that their voices be heard through cinema, one of the only places, and especially American culture, where people go out of their way to hear from someone that they don't know, to see a story they haven't seen before. That if we as the epilepsy community begin to invest our time in that initiative, we're not going to be here in 5 years. we're not going to be here in 10 years. And I know what stigma was like 10 years ago. And I don't want it to be this way in another 10 years. But if you look at where the LGBT community was 10 years ago, depending on your zip code, in many cases, it's a different story. But it's because they did the work, they told their story, they got their voices heard, and now there are Oscar qualifying events that only show stories from that community. Hollywood cannot operate without them. And we can get there too. And once we're there, we won't be having these conversations anymore. And I really believe we can get there in within 10 years.
I would like to open this up to Jim and Miles and Ian. And for those of you that don't know Ian has written a book called Sacred Lives, an account of the history, cultural associations, and social impact of epilepsy. And you stated that unfortunately, you know, our science in epilepsy has advanced, but social acceptance did not. And since we're talking about film, since all of you have been indirectly involved in that arena, I'd like any of you to comment on how you think the film industry is currently in contemporary times doing when they build in epilepsy into the narrative.
Okay. There's been quite a lot of research on films and epilepsy. Sally Baxendale, who you mentioned at the beginning, and Toba Kersen have looked at films and have identified over 150 films in which epilepsy is displayed in one form or of another. And generally the bottom line is that it's not displayed in a particularly positive manner. It tends to be the case that if you're a man in a film with epilepsy, basically you're bad. If you're a woman in a film with epilepsy, you're vulnerable and to be pitied. And the only epilepsy that seems in films to be acceptable is the epilepsy that's acquired through, say, an injury, like a head injury in a war hero. That goes down well with the public. So sadly, I think the cinema has let us down enormously in the way that epilepsy is portrayed. I mean, I could go back, it's over 100 years since epilepsy was first shown in the movies. And one of the very first films in 1929, a talkie, basically was about a man with epilepsy who goes out and gets drunk and marries a prostitute. Not marries a prostitute, murders a prostitute. And that's where we start from. And we go forward from that probably to Electricity, which is maybe the most positive film ever made about epilepsy, that truly displays what it's like to live with the condition and cope with it. I think one platform that has been beneficial is demonstrating epilepsy in soaps on television. And in the United Kingdom, we have a program called EastEnders that has a viewing audience of between 4 and 6 million per week. And one of the main characters in that is a young girl with epilepsy. And the whole storyline has been helped by using an epilepsy charity to make sure that the storyline put forward is correct and appropriate. So there are ways that you can project a very positive image of epilepsy on the moving screen. But to summarize, the cinema has not done as well, no. I think when you see now a film like Coda winning an Academy Award about people who have hearing loss, then maybe you can see that there is the potential for a film about epilepsy to really make a big impact. I think one of the problems in the entertainment world is that we have so few champions that come forward. We have so few people. If we think of epilepsy affecting 1 in 100 people, how many film stars, how many pop singers, how many sports stars are there out there with epilepsy who just do not declare their condition? And if they did that, what an enormous step forward that would be.
Enormous. I always think, John Travolta's son died of a seizure. And John Travolta hasn't gone public with anything about his son's condition. and he's a big movie star guy. He really could have made a dent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And there's musicians too. I mean, you had Prince, who had epilepsy, and then you had Neil Young, who doesn't talk about it. Although there is one song, there is one song that he wrote about epilepsy, but most people, you know, it's kind of hidden and buried. And so I think, Miles, with the work you're doing is so important and really, you know, done right, it could be huge, you know. Before we open it up to the audience, here's one more question I'd like to ask all of you. Since all of us have a connection to the world of epilepsy, is there ever any point in film, you know, because epilepsy is a very, very serious condition, that people can make light of epilepsy? I mean, is there ever a comedic side to epilepsy? And I feel personally, as a parent of a child or adult son now with epilepsy, it's so, and like you're saying, Miles, it's a family condition. It's a family disorder. The whole family, parents are directly involved in it. And when you're a parent, it's hard to ever find a comedic side to epilepsy, you know, but who, is it possible, and who's in that position to do so?
Can I chime in?
Sure, absolutely.
I think for decades, I didn't think there was anything funny about epilepsy. Couldn't write a joke, never laughed, and all the attempts seemed tasteless. And then, frankly, what started to turn me around was the first time we met Miles. Because he has a wonderful sense of humor, and he's coming at it from a point of view of a person with epilepsy. I'm coming at it from the point of view of a dad of a kid who had, so there's nothing funny from my point of view, but Miles has a wonderful self-effacing sense of humor, and he can make jokes, and it hasn't, you know, there hasn't been much of an opportunity this afternoon, but he makes jokes at his own expense, kind of a self-effacing sense of humor that he comes from. And since in the last year, I've met several people with epilepsy who, when you speak about their experience, have found room to make jokes. And they're not tasteless, they're real jokes. And so that's been a real revelation for me.
I agree. I mean, in the United Kingdom, we have a comedian, Maisie Adams, who bases her act around talking about her epilepsy and how her family react to it. And I know in the States, you have Scott Luce, who similarly does the same sort of thing. It is difficult, though, to see the humor in it for a lot of people, because it is such a cross to bear, if you like, in a way, and it's difficult to find a funny side of it. But if you can, like Maisie and Scott, find a funny side, it does bring a little bit of relief to people. Yes.
I feel like Jim made a veiled comment of like, well, you'll have to take my word for it because Miles sure wasn't any fun tonight. Yeah, I think it really has to do with the source, right? Because I don't think it's funny if someone makes a joke on my behalf, right? That's never funny for me. But there is something about watching someone make light of their world that sort of gives permission to everyone else to come along, I think, right? It sort of invites you in to say, well, if they can be confident about it, then I will have to trust them, you know? I will have to not be afraid because they seem to have control over it. And that's something I tried to explore in the feature, because with the short, in the writing of it, the biggest feedback I got was why isn't it funnier? Like, everybody wanted it to be funnier, and I think it was missing the point. That's why it starts with some humor, but then it gets serious. Whereas in the feature, there's conversations about that where the main character makes jokes about it. He's having an EEG put on, and they said, you know, we think you have a seizure disorder. He says, maybe it's a seizure disorder, or maybe it's Maybelline. And then there's another comment where someone else makes a joke about it, and it's really horrible. But it's an opportunity for the audience to say, yeah, I thought that was off color too, you know, and notice the difference. Yeah, it depends on the source, I think.
Yeah.
I think there is also a great danger that a lot of the negative comments about epilepsy are made in a joking way, and the way that people use language to demean people with epilepsy and use humor to demean people with epilepsy. And you see this, I think, on YouTube. You see a lot of really quite unpleasant things that are put out on social platforms that are felt by the people that put them out there to be humorous, but in fact are insulting and demeaning.
Yeah. At this point, I would like to open it up to questions from the audience. I know there must be a lot of people that have questions they'd like to direct to anybody on the panel. So just put them in the chat, and I think Heidi will kind of direct them accordingly. Let's see here. Any questions from the audience here?
Kathy Hozek says that on a daily basis, those issues can be painful, and it's a relief to laugh about it sometimes. Oh, let's see. Jane wants to know, what's your budget for your film, Niles?
With the short, I don't want to talk about it. With the feature, with the feature, we have to raise $1 million because of the size of the cast overall, and we're ready to go. And there's a few different ways that you can donate through the website, and we also can use the money for advertising money. So when a few dollars come in, we are able to boost the viewership of the short, for example, as a way to get more people flowing toward a crowdfunding campaign and things like that. So it's a grassroots effort. Absolutely. I got a question from our friend Ingrid, another filmmaker with epilepsy. Shout out to Ingrid.
Ingrid.
Yeah, Ingrid's here. Do I intend to have an actor with epilepsy? And the answer is that my intention is to have a cast that is mixed on purpose. And the reason is that I think that my primary diagnosis, in my own opinion, for why we have so much trouble getting people to talk about it, is that largely when we talk about it, we're talking about it to each other. And it's hard to get people into the room. And so the real magic moment for me in making the short was that there were people on set who had epilepsy, and there were people on set who did not. And there were people on set who had no idea what epilepsy was when I asked them to be a part of it. And as a result, we left with new advocates. And we left with, for example, the boom operator he wanted to make a feature film, and he said, if I wanted to include epilepsy in my story, would you teach me? Would you show me? Would you find me resources? Would you study with me? That's an incredible thing that happened. By including an actor who did not have epilepsy, not because he didn't have epilepsy or because he had epilepsy, had nothing to do with his diagnosis. He was the right choice for the part out of the people that I had auditioned. But like I said before, he went on to become an epilepsy advocate in his own right and help real people in a real world. And now he is out creating epilepsy advocacy measures that are completely independent of me. And that wouldn't happen had we not done it that way. So it's really important to me that we welcome in people who have no idea what the word means, so that they can leave the set educated on an intimate level.
Miles, Renee wants to know, will your feature include characters with different types of seizures or conversations about the wide variety of symptoms?
Totally. So with more space, you're able to cover a little more ground. However, you know, we're not going to have a character that has every single kind of seizure, because I feel that you're representing almost no one if you have someone who has every single everything, right? Because epilepsy is so broad. There are an unreal amount of ways that epilepsy presents itself. So I am bringing to the table things people already know about epilepsy. Like it's a little controversial. I have to sometimes talk with people about this, but while photosensitive epilepsy is really only present in 3% of people that have seizures, it's actually a very small amount of people. My character does feature that because, one, I think it's okay to invite the community in on something that they already know about. Even though it's a misjudgment that it is everyone that has seizures is affected by lights, it gives them a place to start. But I'm also, you know, like my personal epilepsy, I have myoclonic absence seizure. So that's present in the character because that's something I'm educated on that I can deliver authentically. Tonic-clonic grand mal seizures, that's something that I'm educated on that I can deliver authentically. So most of the time, what I'm focusing on is the social element, which binds all of us as people with epilepsy together into one shared experience, and therefore is something that I can educate the public on as a whole, as to what it's like to be us. Whereas if I feature just one person with just one symptom, and conversely, one character with all symptoms, I might not be helping them understand my neighbor who has different epilepsy than me. And that's my goal.
Miles, we have a lot of questions. Courtney, why don't we start with you?
Hi, Courtney.
Hi. It's not a question. I just wanted to thank you for making this, because I went to school in the 90s and early 2000s, and nobody at my school was trained in epilepsy and seizure, like first aid or anything. So, and I literally, the only thing they knew was to take me out before fire drills, because the strobe lights could affect me. But since my school was under construction, we had a lot of unplanned fire drills. So yeah, they couldn't take me out before those ones. So it was just frustrating because like I couldn't tell them, like, for the unplanned ones, that I don't know what to do because the strobe lights affect me, and like I didn't feel safe at my school. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you for doing this and bringing the attention to that. And I didn't go to my prom because I didn't know if there were strobe lights or whatever, you know. I had to make that decision for myself, and I would have loved to have gone, but for me, I felt it was better not to. And it's just hard when people don't realize that, because even last year, people were like, oh, you're demon possessed. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I've posted it so many times that it's not demon possession. And some people are like, oh, you called it into your life. Like, I'm like, no. There's like, there's so much out there still in, like, even in 2022 that's like so wrong, even though you try to tell them it's not, like, that it's not bad. It, like, yeah, I wish I never had it. I would not wish it on anyone. And it's just like, why? Why do I have to keep saying the same stuff? Like, people need to be informed about this.
I think it's mind blowing to me that the conversation, I think to say something like, you know, demon possession is still happening is so upsetting. And
this is
I would blame movies. I blame movies for that, because they're, Dr. Ian.
I was just going to add the Requiem and The Exorcism of Emily Rose are two films that were about the same story, about demonic possession and exorcism. One of the extraordinary things, Courtney, is that in a lot of the world, if you go to Africa, a lot of people in Africa still believe that epilepsy is a consequence of demonic possession. And it's terrible, but it is still out there, and it's one of the many myths about epilepsy that still persists. If I could
in
just
the United States, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. If I can just come back to one thing about the potential of cinema and television to educate, and that is in terms of how to manage seizures. And there was a study done, and I've got it in front of me here, looking at 4 television programs: Grey's Anatomy, House MD, Private Practice, and ER. And 59 seizures in over 500 episodes were documented or shown on television, and only in 1/3 of them was first aid adequately given and appropriately given. So there we have a platform on television to educate the public, and yet it's misused. And you know, that's another thing we have to think about. If these platforms are out there, if these films are out there, what does the epilepsy community, what power does the epilepsy community have to actually ensure that what goes out to the public is correct and appropriate?
Yeah, definitely. And it's annoying when, like, I contact news stations and stuff to try to get it out there, and they're like, they don't even contact me back. I'm just like, there's somebody in your community that wants to talk about this and bring awareness to it, and they don't contact me. And it's like, why? Instead, they were talking about book controversy. I'm like, do people die from book controversies? Like, you know, priorities. And it's sad.
Miles, we have some questions from your friend Carlos and from Miss Julie. Thank you, Courtney.
Carlos, you go first.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah. There we go.
So first of all, Miles, you're awesome. That's all I have to say.
You're awesome.
Every time I hear you talking, it's like I feel so inspired. You inspire me so much. I want to real quick, like, when you think about the power of the movie, right? Like what Miles is trying to do, what we're trying to do. And I have some experience that kind of show us what the potential of the movie can have in our society. When we go to our summer camp for children living with epilepsy, and epilepsy disappears. There is no epilepsy in that camp. There are seizures, but there's no epilepsy. And you start questioning. I always wonder, like, why do I feel like when I'm in camp that there's no epilepsy? Because every one of those kids understand perfectly what it is to live with epilepsy. So if we can accomplish our goal to have a movie that ignites the question of what is epilepsy, what are the psychological effects, not just to the person living with epilepsy, but everybody around. And we can push that education, get rid of the ignorance, get rid of the stigma, epilepsy will disappear. I hope you understand I'm exaggerating, and like, it's a psychological point of view, you know. The more we educate, the more we get not just the epilepsy community, but everybody outside the epilepsy community understand what we see happening to the epilepsy community, the more chances we have where those jokes are not going to happen. You were talking about humor. I see those kids making jokes with each other about their seizure activity. And they're comfortable with it because they understand. They're not trying to be mean. It's just a normal part of their lives. I see this movie, the full feature, the short for sure is already happening. It's already making that difference. But the full feature movie hopefully will create an environment where the ignorance goes away. I mean, I think about my first experience watching Rayman with Tom Cruise and I don't remember his name. And that movie show autism from a point of view that changed forever. Epilepsy is incredibly more complex than autism because there's 30 different types of seizures. Half of the patients don't even know what is causing it. And the way it presents in your life is so complicated. It's so different from point to point. So it's gonna take a long time to do in one movie what Raymond did for autism. But one of the things that I admire about Miles, and I have read his script, what Miles' point of view is this movie is a lot less about seizures and epilepsy, and it's about how we all can be part of the solution as a society through one single example of a normal life, of a life of somebody suffering from seizures and how it affects what we call a normal life all around it. So I have huge hopes for this movie, and Miles knows it. I'm gonna do anything I can to make that movie happen. So
Right.
Miles, Misty wants to know how we can help besides donations. Is there a bigger picture in your vision, like 4Ks or other types of fundraisers that they can start and help?
The really wonderful thing about having a community so large is that people have better ideas than you. And so if you have ideas, please come to me with them. I want to collaborate. I want to strategize. But at a base, simple level, the best thing that you can do is spread the word. Show the short to someone if it meant something to you. That, you know, it only raises as much awareness as the amount of eyeballs that saw it. So if you are able to brainstorm with me, then I appreciate it. There will be a crowdfunding element to it. There will be an element where we need people of means who, you know, perhaps have kids with seizures, who want, you know, believe in what we're doing, who want to come forward. That's how the short was made. It was an amalgamation of all of those things. We had a certain amount of matching funds from people who had epilepsy who wanted to make a difference, and we had, you know, 2/3 of it was entirely grassroots. So yes, please, let's talk.
Jane wants to know how close you are to your goal.
How close? Well, we just started. So we just started, but I have meetings every day.
Oh, let's see, Victoria, let me bring you up.
Oh. Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you. I think it's a really great film, and
thank you.
Yeah, I really like it. I feel like I can show it to my clients. I'm a mental health therapist, and I've had epilepsy for since I was like 6 years old. So usually I mentioned, like someone mentioned Dory, because I have memory loss, and you know, I usually, when my clients ask me something and I don't remember, I usually tell them I identify with Drew. I think it's Drew Barrymore from that comes out with Adam Sandler in the movie. So I'm like her, like short-term memory loss. Like I don't remember what you told me last week. So can you remind me what we discussed in our session? So like, you know, or like Dory, and like I bring a lot of examples from films. So I'm like, you know, this is how I can educate them, like through your film. And you know, like you could look it up here, we could do this. And you know, throughout my career, like I think I've been a therapist for about 8-9 years so far, and I think I could I don't know, like shed some light on it, because I think I could tell you at least 5-6 people with epilepsy so far. So it's like a dual diagnosis. Like usually either they have epilepsy and anxiety, epilepsy and depression. And I met quite a few people, and it's about spreading the word, like you said, educating them. And I just like the way you did it on the film. And
Thanks. Yeah, please make it useful to you. I want it to be a tool that people have at their disposal for, like I said, ideas that are better than mine. So that would be really, really great.
No, yeah, it's very helpful, especially like for teens, for kids.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
teens are into it. That's the teens and tweens. Something I want to do, back to Ingrid's point, actually, was I just remembered was something I want to do is I want to put people in the prom scene that did not get to go to prom in real life.
Oh, okay.
That's something I want to do. We'll see how that comes about, but because it's a movie set, there are no flashing lights, so that would be very cool. But yeah, there's just movies bring people together on and off set.
What about doing a movie like sorry to interrupt you, like doing a movie like back in time? I don't know how they call them, but like in the present towards the past. I don't know how to describe
flashback?
them. Yeah, a flashback.
Yeah, there's all kinds of different narrative devices that allow us not to have strobe lights. As someone who has epilepsy who doesn't, and I'm not affected by strobe lights, I think strobe lights are obnoxious. I think that's enough.
Same here. I'm not affected by lights, but I would rarely go to clubs because I would get disturbed, but they wouldn't affect my seizures.
It's disorienting for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your idea. I hope that you'll use it.
Thanks,
Victoria. Kathy.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I've been taking little notes and everything is added up. I have to be specific, but keeping a person with epilepsy involved, keeping our attention is very difficult. I had my hippocampus removed, so my memory is long and short term, not very good, but so holding our attention and holding an average person's attention is different. So I guess people can connect to the prom. I don't remember, it was 20 years ago, I didn't go, but I guess it's a good start because young people are easier to teach than people in their 40s. So does this, and I've only seen that part, I'm sorry, is the rest of the movie coming out?
Right. So that's the goal, is we're developing that. So the script exists. I've written the script, and I'm working with producers and stuff, outlining everything and putting the budget together and all the first steps, so that with funding we can go and we can make it. And then creating our plan for how does this reach the eyeballs of everyone else? What's the distribution plan? How do you get this on streaming services? How do you get this sold? Is that the right way to go? Like, it's all the business stuff, but it's ready to go and it will be made. It's just a question of how fast.
Well, you have a completely different way of thinking than people like me, because I think those important steps are impossible to follow for people who have seizures, or some people. So keeping on task is very important in life, and that's a challenge. So doing this will show that our disabilities does not stop us from functioning like other
I want to
people.
address that. I want
like
to
a lot of people. Does that?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So I definitely can't make a movie like other people, right? I have to delegate everything. So there were rules on my set. Every single person that was there was either my first choice because I knew them or knew of them, or they were someone that I didn't know that came recommended, as a great person to be around, and that the quality of the person came before the talent. And as you could see, there was plenty of talent, right? Everyone was highly competent, but that's beside the point. I do things differently. If I wanted to be a filmmaker and I had to play by everybody else's rules, it would be impossible. I cannot wake up at 5 a.m. and get in a car and get to set when everyone else arrives. Like, every part of that sentence is something I can't do, and that I will never do. I can't be out at 11:30 at night packing up gear, or God forbid 2 a.m. or something like that. I can't do that. I will never be able to do that. So the first thing that I do is I put together a team, or I ask people, who do you know that can do blank, right? And I ask people who are smarter than me, and I delegate so that I only have to focus on the things that I'm best at and that I know how to do. And when we're on set, you don't ask, the rule is, don't ask Miles questions that your department head can answer. Do not ask Miles what time lunch is. Do not ask Miles what time we're shooting the next shot. Someone else in this room knows the answer to that question. He has just enough energy to get through the day. Please don't ask Miles what time lunch is, right? And everybody was respectful of that. And so I got by, but I also had food on me at all times. I put together the schedule in such a way that my amount of energy that I could bring to the table would be just enough to get by. It did not function like a regular movie. And so when I make the feature, it also has to work that way, that there's a second group of people that can go get the kinds of shots that I don't have to be there for. When we need a shot of a house and someone walking in, maybe if we talk about it in advance and how I want it done, I don't really have to be there. I can go and I can eat, I can rest, I can do those things. And I hope that in talking about this and having this conversation, there are other artists out there, or just people with epilepsy who have goals of their own, who get the gist, right? That there's a version of this, that not all people are good at all things. Not all people are capable of doing all things, but we can make amenities and accommodations. We can demand them, and we can surround ourselves with people who love us enough to work together. And in doing so, people like me are able to make short films,
Okay, well, that's great. Well, thank you for staying on task. That's very difficult.
I'm trying.
And right, so it's possible we can think, we can be very matter of fact, and we don't get dreamy all the time. That's fun to talk that way because we're artists, just going into detail and off the subject, but it's important to be matter of fact and on top of things.
Yeah,
so
there's a version. A quote unquote regular person would have made this movie in 2 days. I took 3, and then I had to raise enough money that a person like me could do my best work, and the team was big enough that we could be efficient, and I didn't have to think about what time lunch is, like things like that, right? And then I was able to do it. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I chime in here?
Of course.
Yeah. So virtually everything that you just said, I completely relate to. I don't have epilepsy. I believe that movie making is the ultimate collaborative art form. And the sooner, from my point of view, I got my mind around that, the more comfortable I was. And, I didn't know what time lunch was either. Matter of fact, don't get me going. But so I believe that you have all the necessary tools, the important tools to be a film director. And, you will surround yourself with the right people to make your movie great.
And I have tonight.
Heidi,
I'm talking to Jim Abrams.
Yeah. Heidi, can I just say something too? Because in the audience tonight, we have a number of artists that have contributed their voice through art, and they live with epilepsy. And now we have filmmakers, we have 2 filmmakers. And if any of the other artists in the audience that have worked with Hidden Truths Project want to make a comment on how, or have they used their art form to advance understanding of epilepsy. I know many of you that are there have done it, and I would just love to hear some comments on the visual arts combined with filmmaking and music. Have you used that art form to further your cause? Brian? Or Laura? Or Renee?
Brian's got his hand up.
I'll talk.
There.
I think I'm off mute. I also wanted just to congratulate Miles. It's been fun seeing
Ryan Farley.
Yeah. I'm getting a haircut on Tuesday, so I thought I'd at least show it one more time before it got really short again. But I've known Miles since you were just like documenting camp and other things. And camp for me, because I didn't have it when I was a teenager, just going to that camp was transformational for me. Just seeing, I wanted to be a role model for the kids, and it turned out that they were role models for me on how to be comfortable with themselves. And we had this walk and again, Carlos and our foundation. And I remember just how scared I was the very first time I walked into one of the Epilepsy Foundation buildings just to identify. This was only 15 years ago or less. But a lot of it goes back to the camp and younger people, and I'm really grateful for that. I've tried to use, to answer the other question, I try to use art just in one to show that we can do it, and 2, that I think our stories need to be told in part by us. And I am light sensitive, so some of my pictures emphasize that. There's distracting elements that really can trigger my brain to work differently, and so I also just use that as a departure to show that we can get things done and that we exist. And as a teacher, I run into that problem. That's one thing I'm excited about your film, Miles, is that the short and the long can be used as a way to show that we exist. And because it's really hard to have conversations about stigma if people don't exist in the first place. And so that's really how I try to use it, is just a way to say, look, this is why I take pictures differently. This is why I talk differently. This is why, actually, when I'm with a group of people with epilepsy, I can talk really fast because they keep up with me. But with the rest of them, I'm like, I need to slow it down. And Miles, I look forward to how I can contribute with this next project.
Miles, you've had a lot of volunteers. So when you're ready, if you need more people, there were several hands raised willing to be in the movie with you.
It's amazing. It's amazing. This will be a great challenge for me, but I think from a able-bodied producer's perspective, like from the outside, like regular film folk looking in, they'll say, wow, that movie was made very efficiently, because there's so much enthusiasm for it, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Is there anyone else with their hand raised? I apologize if I missed it. Let me check through.
Or questions for Jim or Dr.
Or
Ian Bone?
And for those of you that, and I'll send it out to everyone too, Dr. Bone has the slides from the information from his book, and it details the different movies from long ago until present, and how epilepsy is portrayed. So if you'd like another version, I did put it in the chat, but I'll be happy to send it to you as well. Oh, Jane wants to know the link to make a donation. I'm going to put that up there.
Thank you, Jane.
Well,
Oh, can I throw something out?
Absolutely.
There's a Dr. Ian Bone. You might have you seen The Rider by Chloe Zhao?
No, I haven't. No.
So this is an interesting. While we're talking about epilepsy in film, there's a movie that came out in 2017, I want to say, about someone who has, I believe, partial seizures, and that director went on to be only the second woman in history to win an Oscar for directing the very next cycle. So, and the thing that happened in this movie was that they never used the word epilepsy. Now, not for any of the wrong reasons, just that they told this story and it didn't cross anybody's minds that we all would have probably been on board with this movie and there to support it. It would have been so easy. We would have gotten excited about it. The only reason this community largely doesn't know that movie exists is because they didn't say the word. They didn't put it out there in that way, which is a shame because I've never seen partial seizures in movies. And it's a Sundance winning film. And
I don't know that, Miles. What's the name again?
The Rider. And
The Rider. Okay.
It's about a boy who wants to be he was formerly a famous rodeo rider, and he's trying to literally get back on the horse again, but he has a diagnosis and he's been told not to.
Okay, I'll look that out. Okay.
Miles, Nancy wants to know if you're thinking of including people with autism who have seizures, or is that opening too many issues?
Well, I mean, the great thing about having a cast that, like when you shoot a movie that takes place at a school, for example, is that it requires lots of people. So you can include people from all walks of life, and hopefully that's the case. For the sake of this movie, to keep it really, really focused on specifically, this one untold story, the subject matter, the conversations, the dialogue, all really, really focuses around epilepsy. Although actually there is a character with another disability in it. There's another character that's suffering from early onset dementia that's featured in the film. And part of the reason I chose that specific disability was that as I may have seen, I don't believe I said this yet. Something that occurs to me is that just about every elderly character you see in a movie features some form of memory loss. And so whether you have someone in your family that suffers from Alzheimer's or dementia or not, you are very familiar with it. And there's a great deal of empathy in our world for it. Because it is so visible. And so I want the opportunity to make that point to audiences of, you see this character, what was your first reaction to that character? Oh, it was probably based deeply in empathy, right? Whereas another character's empathy maybe has to be discovered. Your empathy for another character has to be discovered. Why is that? As for autism specifically, there isn't a character that features that, but hopefully there will be someone in the cast. That would be very cool in some form, in some role.
And Renee has a question. You're up. You have to unmute.
My visual moved around on the screen and then I suddenly was unable to unmute quickly. So, well, kind of a response to a few things that were said. I was afraid to say anything at all because I was afraid I would just like gush and like say too much. So I'll try to keep it short. We've been here for a while, but everyone, thank you for having another awesome Hidden Truths related event and for everything you said. And Miles, I have to tell you, I was tearing up when I was watching this, and it was the first time that I had seen someone with a seizure or who had just had a seizure on you know, time-based medium like that, and I actually saw the person. Usually when I see stuff on TV, I say, oh, here we go with the seizure, you know, like they're just kind of gonna throw one in there to like shock people or get attention or whatever. And that is not what I saw. And you brought me back to, you know, high school, and also Dr. Julie, with your question about the humor. And I hadn't thought about that. Is there something funny about epilepsy? And I remember having seizures and they were kind of trippy. I guess they're still calling them partial seizures now. And I would get like words and images and things like that. And some people saw me have them when I was in high school. And some people were like, are you clairvoyant? You know, because you're like hearing voices and stuff. And I actually said to one of my friends at the time that like, oh, I don't think you should go out this weekend or whatever. And I repeated some like weird thing that I heard during a seizure, you know what I'm saying? And I was not diagnosed at this time. I had no idea what was happening to me. I had no clue, right? And I thought like, that is funny. You're laughing now, thank you. Okay, but that is funny. I mean, when you think about like how whacked did that sound when I said that to this person?
Yeah.
People are probably like, I'm gonna hang around her a little bit less now, you know what I mean? And other people are like, oh, well, she's artsy, you know, or whatever. But yeah, and I thought of a few other things, so I won't bore you guys with that. But yeah, and as far as trying to, it's usually indirectly incorporated into my art, but recently I did try to write up a little book called Lost and Found, Things I Shouldn't Say About Epilepsy, and it needs to be revised. It's not at the quality I would want it to be, but it is about basically saying some stuff that I didn't even realize was on my mind, or like different experiences that I've had that maybe need to be communicated, that let my condition and many other people's go undiagnosed for like years and years, because people are just not aware of even the seizure that they're most familiar with, one where somebody actually falls and it's recognizably a seizure. They still don't know how to go up and help the person.
Yeah.
That's
something I want to just throw something out there. I think whether a story is ready or not, you know, by your own standards, the wonderful thing about telling it is that the person sitting next to you maybe decides to tell theirs, you know? And right. I think that's what's the most wonderful thing about the Hidden Truths Project to me, is that every time, like this is the second time now, but that I've been, but each time someone puts forward that they have a story too. And that's what's the most meaningful to me, is that we started by saying, you know, oh, like John Travolta won't speak up, you know, and he's not, like, we're not, we can't wait on that. We can't wait on, you know, The Cure, or like, there are all these sort of, these ideas that are sort of pending. But if you tell your story, someone else will. And now there are more people that are hearing epilepsy stories. And then one day we'll get to where these other communities are at, but it's an exponential effect, right? So I hope you'll tell your story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Maybe it's a little bit of a start tonight. And thank you for everyone who mentioned memory loss too. That was a very validating experience for me tonight too.
You know, I want to echo something Renee and Carlos, you said earlier. The one beauty of Hidden Truths Project that I have seen over the years, and our 10th anniversary is this year, by the way. We have, I think what a lot of the people and the participants have shared is that it's helped build a community. And it's a community with their peers where they had that freedom, that they weren't labeled, you know, they came together, they shared their art, they shared their stories through art, and there was no otherness, you might say. We are all part of the same. And that's the beauty of art and Hidden Truths Project. You know, we're hoping to build this large community that we, you know, we're not different. We're all part of the same society, the same world. We just, certain people have different issues, you know? And so Carlos, thank you for sharing about the community building through your camp. I know because we've experienced it through our work. And I mean, and Renee, you've shared your voice many times and your amazing artwork with us, which has opened up doors. So, you know, I feel extremely fortunate for everybody's contributions. So,
wow. Well, we've kept you all on quite long, and we're happy to keep the window open.
We got a hand raised.
We do? Okay, I apologize. Who did I miss?
Laura.
Laura, which Laura?
Well, Laura, it wasn't in the chat, but Laura's raising her real hand.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, Laura Mello?
Hey, Laura.
Hello. Yeah, hi. I don't know if I'm on or not.
I'm trying to find you. There you are.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, this was a fabulous movie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you know, it's so cool. You're bringing comedy to it. And you're making it light because it's so heavy. And like you said, everything on that's out there is so heavy. So thank you. And, you know, those of us who live with it, or those of us who, you know, we have people we love who live with it. This is so important. And one of the things I've seen over and over and over and over again is the fear, not only those who have it, but those around. It's scary for those who care for those with epilepsy. It's scary for people walking on the street who have no idea about anything. Yeah. And what is epilepsy? And this is the profound difference that I find art can make. You can do it visually. And what Dr. Julie, you've done is phenomenal. You've taken the visual and just thank you. You've really opened doors for people. You're phenomenal. And then to see what you're doing with the you know, getting into the movies and getting into so many more levels, there's just such a need. So thank you for your creativity and such a need. So thank you. Love it. Yeah. So, but anyway, but that fear is something that I've seen over and over and over again. I grew up with epilepsy. So, and I would go into a seizure. I'd come out, I could hear, I couldn't see, I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, but I could hear. And the one thing I always heard, and I would be attentive to, is people's reaction. Some people are very caring, like, oh, let's help take care of her. What's going on? Or some people would be like, what is this? Others were really mean. I mean, we're talking mean. And then others were scared. And what I found looking back and observing is that fear was so intense. It was fear to go to the meanness. It was fear to go to the confusion. It was fear to help those and go with the love. But that fear was really there. And I feel that fear, there's so much with the misunderstanding. They just don't know about it. It's so this is so important. And so I just feel like this just will, you know, open doors and then help not only the fear, those of us who go through it. I mean, it's like, it's fear is a part of it, you know, welcome to having epilepsy, you know, here we go again. And, but for those who don't have to live with the day to day, or those, our family, our friends, those who love us, who would have taken care of, they really need that help. And I find that they're really appreciative of it. And Miles, I think it's going to do incredible good and just open it up in a way that, hey, this is just another thing. It's okay. You know,
when you mention the fear, Laura, the amazing thing is that 50% of the population will see a seizure at some time during their life. So it's not about 1 in 2 people will see a seizure at some time during their life. So the vast majority of the population will actually witness a seizure. But you're right, the fear is a thing that is something very difficult to get around.
Yes, in that knowledge and teaching. And then, Miles, it's interesting you're saying there's so many types of seizures. I mean, there are like, you know, tons out there. Which ones do you concentrate on? So you're doing the ones that you know, the tonic-clonic, or the, you know, and yet there's so many different types. And that's another whole educational level to take people into and to teach them about. And but yeah, it's and we all have stories, I know, about, you know, how other people have reacted, whether, you know, and sometimes other people really need help. Other times they just need someone there, you know, if it's a partial complex or petit mal, but, you know, you get into the tonic-clonic, or, you know, and whatever the fancy names are, you know, they're all changing and things. But so it's just profound. So I'm totally stoked. Anyway. So cool. So anyway, so I know a lot of people are going to want to be there for you and be a part of things. So anyway.
Yeah.
We're all getting stoked on epilepsy for the first time.
Lots have it, you know, so yeah. Well, and then a lot of us have it, and then there's so many more who care and love for those who do. That always comes back because it's just so much more than 1 out of 26, or 4% of the population. It's a heck of a lot more than that, because how many of us have family and friends and those we love, or even just walking down the street, it's there, like you said. So
Courtney, you had another question?
No, another comment. I forgot to say this earlier. Someone earlier mentioned the thing about doing like videos on social media. Yeah. Early February, I had for the EEG on me at home. So guess what I did? Every single day, I did a Facebook Watch. Because it looked funny. It looked like I was a mummy or whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm like, yeah, I look like I'm dressed for Halloween, but this is life for some people with epilepsy. And it was just like, I was making light of it, but it was just, like, what else can I do? I'm bored. I can't do anything that makes me sweat. So I was in my room all day, every day, doing it. And I was just like, okay, let's just update them and say what it's like, why, what's frustrating about it, what's confusing about it,
I always felt like a robot.
Yeah.
And that's actually the feature. The character is in an EEG in a walking EEG most of the story.
Yeah, it was, and just the comments that they had on the videos, they're like, you're so brave, you're an inspiration. I'm like, what? That's not why I did this.
Yep.
But yeah, I did kind of make funny videos because it looks funny and I had nothing better to do.
That's what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Heidi is muted.
Heidi, you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. I'll have to send you the transcript. There are a lot of nice notes in here, long ones. And so I'll package those up and send them to you, Miles. And a lot of people who would want to help you. So I'll give you their email addresses. They provided them.
Everyone.
So and Miles is one of our favorite artists, as well as Laura and Kathy and all the rest of them here. We have a lot of artists on the line tonight, and we can't thank you enough for being here and for supporting us and Hidden Truths Project and for supporting Miles.
Thank you, everyone. This is always so fun, and it really means the world to me.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. It was fabulous.
Fabulous.
Yep. Kudos.
All right.
Night, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.